over years, maybe 2 decades, they had not been successful in getting these guys to attack me, even though those people are telling me that the voices are telling them to attack me. Not one of them did it. So then comes this guy I was working with for some 6 months. This guy was really intriguing because he would tell me everything he would say, and he would also tell me their reaction to what I would say. So it's like, okay, what do they think about that? So here they are telling him, what was it? It first came the dangerous, you know what you're doing is dangerous. And then they come in and he was saying, they were saying all kinds of bad things about me. And then one day he comes in and he goes, the voices want to talk to you. And that had never happened before. Everything before that for 20 years or so was the patient would tell me what the voices were saying, and I would tell him to go screw off or whatever I was saying. So it was the patient was always the mediator. He was the one in between. They had never come out and talked to me personally. So I'm, even up to that point, where he's telling me, hey, they're dangerous, you better watch what you're doing here. I'm still thinking, this is some figment of their subconscious. I mean, looking back at it, I must have been retarded. I just didn't want to see it. I did not want to see it. I didn't want to believe that I was dealing with demons, that these things were separate entities, or that this world actually existed. I'm still thinking this is some crazy thing in their mind. I knew it wasn't a chemical imbalance because that had been disproved long ago. And psychiatrists, I watched them. They didn't give one single test ever to measure anything. They're saying, oh, this is a chemical imbalance. Well, what lab tests are you giving to find out what is imbalanced? There's 23 or some different neurotransmitters in the brain, and they're giving no test to measure whatever they're supposed to be imbalanced. They don't even know what the balance of these neurotransmitters should be. They're saying, because the drug companies are telling them this is an imbalance, and they believe it. And these drug company representatives would constantly be flooding the place, giving these big lunches and lectures, and this is a chemical man, and this works, and that. So they're listening to the damn drug companies, and the drug companies are filling them with all this garbage. So here comes one day, he shows up at my office door in the prison without an appointment. Knocks on the door and he goes, the voices want to talk to you. And I'm like, they want to talk to me personally? He goes, yeah, they want to talk to you personally. They want to talk to you. So he comes in and he sits down, and I'm kind of like, what's going on here? And I look at him and he's looking at me, and I said, well, what do they have to say? And these words came out of his mouth. His tone changed slightly. He looked me in the eye and he goes, you have no right to interfere with our way of life. And I'm like, whoa. It's like my head just went bam, And then he comes in, he goes, that wasn't me speaking, that was them. And the plural, our way of life. I mean, this was one page. This was one inmate just sitting before me. And I'm like, I went into shock. I knew at that moment that my denial system just collapsed. It just completely collapsed. And I'm going, what am I dealing with here? So he's told me that what I was doing was dangerous. They come out and tell me they don't much appreciate it, and it was kind of like an ominous thing, like back off. You have no right to be doing this. And I'm like, what do you mean I don't have a right to be doing this? I said something like, you're destroying these people. What do you mean I have no right to do this? And after that, it was like, okay, there was no doubt in my mind that this wasn't a hallucination. These things were entities. They were aware of me. they didn't like me and they were warning me off. You know? But still, even at that point, I'm thinking, you know, screw them. You know, even if they are entities, they're stuck in this guy. They can't get me. The only thing I've noticed prior to that is that I feel drained somewhat after working with these guys for a while. So if that's the worst they can do to me, that's okay. You know, and I didn't stop. So,
what shifted in you? I mean, what about your belief systems? Did you have to change what you believed in?
oh, hell yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so what shifted in you? Because these are earth-shatteringly paradigm-shifting, you know, realizations, aren't they?
Yeah.
So what
So I,
changed for you?
well, I went into shock.
Yeah.
You know, I went into shock.
I've been there.
It was like I shut my office and just kind of the rest of the day just sat there staring out the window like, what am I getting myself into? Where is this going? What are these things? But the only thing I'd felt up to that point is just being drained after working with these guys. I'd never experienced any other thing. You know, they would curse at me through the patient and you know, these guys, see, it was a real interesting balance because, you know, sometimes these voices would tell them to hurt me or somebody else. And if they went and did that, and administration saw that I was aware of it and I didn't lock these guys up, you know, because in the prison you have a whole lot more power than you do in the state hospital. I mean, you have a lot more control over what happens to these guys. So I could say, hey, this guy's dangerous. He needs to be locked up. He needs to be sent to the medical unit. He needs to be drugged up, you know, and they knew that. So I had to be very careful because if they told me something, you know, that the voices were telling them, I had to kind of ferret out between them and in my own mind is how much of a threat are they, and do I need to actually step in and do something at this point, or can I just go on their word that they're not going to act on what they're being told? And what I had is an agreement with all these guys in my group that, you know, there might have been maybe 9 or 10 schizophrenics at any one time in that entire unit who would come and would tell me everything. And they would feel me out, you know, they would see if I can be trusted. And it was like walking on the razor's edge sometime, you know, because it's like, okay, how far can you let them go and trust them not to hurt or kill somebody or myself before I had to take action? And sometimes they would test me and they'd say, well, the voices are telling me this. And I'd say, well, can you keep that under control or do you need help? And I had a special arrangement with them that, you know, this small group, if something happened where they felt they were losing it, they could come and tap on my window in my office and I would get them in that same day if I possibly could. You know, so I was watching after them. And once that happened, it was like it just wore me out. But I didn't stop working with this guy, and he kept telling me, listen, they're getting more and more pissed off with you. And he was getting better and better. So one day I was reading a book by Miguel Ruiz. I forgot what it was. He's that South American shaman who was talking about these things as parasitic entities.
Okay.
So I brought that book into the prison, and I brought this one guy in whose voices came out and said, hey, you know, knock it back off. And I wanted to know what he thought about this page or two where Miguel Ruiz is talking about these things as dangerous energy parasites. I wanted his opinion. I'd do that all the time. I'd always ask him, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? What happens when this happens? I mean, it was constantly hitting him with questions like, how are they reacting to what we said here? How are they reacting to this information? How are they reacting to the rubber band snap when you snap your rubber band? You know, what are they doing now? What are they saying now? I mean, it was constant. It was like looking into this strange dimension and getting feedback from these people, and they're all saying the same thing. You know, it was all consistent, all these different schizophrenics are all telling me basically the same thing. So I brought him into my office, and I was curious about how the voices would react to their actually being told they were energy parasites and the patient hearing this. I mean, the patient already knew that they were draining them, but even though they were drained 1,000 times in the past, they could not make the link between being drained and the appearance of these voices. It was like they just couldn't make it. They couldn't see the link. They were blocked from seeing it. So, when I pointed out that the voices would get nuts. So I brought this in just to see how they would react to it. And he sat down, closed the door, and I started reading him what Miguel Ruiz says about these things being energy parasites and sucking their energy. And he went into this kind of like zombie-like stare. And he's just staring at me. And I look up from the reading and I said, that's really odd. And I'm like, what is going on with this guy? And I started being a little concerned because they'd always put female guards in the medical unit where I worked. And if one of these guys attacked, I was on my own virtually. By the time anybody got there who could stop them except me, whatever was going to happen would have happened. Either they were going to kick the crap out of me, or I was going to kick the crap out of them, or we were going to kick the crap out of each other. But I started getting a little bit concerned because this guy's affect in his face just went flat. Just went flat. And he's like staring at me like with this strange look and this strange affect. And as I continued to read a little bit more about these things being parasites, all of a sudden this electrical crackling exploded from behind my head. Wow. It just like an arc welder. It was like crack, 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 and I'm like, what? And I look around, I don't see anything. And then it starts moving across the wall to the wall over to my right. And it didn't stop. And it crackled all the way up that wall at a 45-degree angle to the ceiling and on the other side of the office. And I'm like, what the hell's going on here? And I'm freaked out. I'm totally freaked out. I can hear this. I can't see anything. I can't smell anything. I can't feel anything. But none of this is making any sense. And he's just sitting there staring at me and not moving. And I'm going back and forth, going, this guy's going to attack. And I push my chair back against the office wall. So if he comes at me, I can kick him back and then either get out or do whatever I need to do. So I at least have, can break up that attack. And this thing's crack, 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 all, just like an arc welder. And I look at him and I say, do you hear that? And he's just staring at me, just this eerie stare. He's not saying anything. He's sitting just straight, just looking at me like a zombie. And this thing continues. It hits the top of the office near the ceiling, and it crackles across the back of the office up near the ceiling over his head. So I can see him and the thing wherever that noise is at the same time. There was no light. I couldn't see anything coming from that noise. I couldn't smell anything. There wasn't any ozone. There wasn't anything like that associated with electricity. And it just keeps crackling. It hits the wall to my left. And then it starts coming down at a 45-degree angle toward me. Crack, 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 crack. And I'm looking at him. He's still just this zombie-like thing. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm just like freaked out. And it wasn't just like a few seconds. This was like 20, 30 seconds this took. And it just didn't stop. So it wasn't like, you couldn't explain it away. It's like, hey, it might have been this or that. And it comes down the wall and it's crack, crack. And I'm looking between it and him hitting, kind of like, expecting him to attack, but trying to figure out what this thing was. And then it goes into this Rubbermaid trash can right at my left leg, and it's crackling from the trash can. So I turn around and I look in the trash can, and it's empty. The inmate porter had emptied it the night before. There's nothing in there, yet this electrical crackling is coming from there. And I'm like, what the hell is going on here? And I'm looking at him, And then the crackling stops, and he slowly gets up with this strange affect, and he goes, "I gotta go." And he stands up real rigid,
The
and he
zombie.
starts heading to the door, and I'm going, "Yeah, get the hell out of here! Go, leave, go away!" You know. And he shuffles down out of the office, and he walks down the corridor, and he disappears. And I'm like, "What the hell just happened?" You know. And it's like I was completely blown away. I couldn't function after that. I mean, nobody would believe it.
No.
I had nobody I could talk to. I couldn't go to my boss and, "Hey, man, a schizophrenic just did this weird thing. My office is crackling all over with electricity." "Yeah, man, let's go to Dorsey. Yeah, I think you're unstable, man. You can't be working here." There's nobody I could talk to. I couldn't talk. My wife, I mean, every time I bring this up, she just, you know, like, "I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it." So I couldn't talk to her, you know. I couldn't talk to anybody. I just had to, the only people I could talk to were the schizophrenics.
That is bizarre.
So I was so freaked out that and so afraid that I didn't call this guy in probably for 2-3 months afterward. You know, I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to talk to him. I didn't want to deal with him. And after about, you know, it was 2 or 3 months, I put out a pass and had the guards bring him to me. And you know, he looked good. I thought that he would be a wreck.
Yeah.
You know, if they could do that, they were strong enough to destroy him. And I thought he would be a wreck when he came, but he looked good. You know, he had a good energy level. And I said, I thought you would be a friggin' wreck. I hadn't seen you in 2 months. We hadn't had a visit. He goes, "Well, I've been doing some of the stuff you said to do, and I'm keeping him down." And his energy level was way past what I was expecting. And that freaked me out too, because I was expecting to see him wiped out after that. And I said, I asked him, I said, do you remember the last time you talked to me in here? Did you hear that crackling sound in the office? And he goes, "Yeah, I heard it." And he said, "But I was surprised you did." So he was surprised that I heard it. Yeah. And that warped me too. It's like, why are you surprised that I heard it? That didn't make any sense. And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "That was them." I mean, them? You mean the voices did that? And he goes, "Yeah, that was them." And I said, "What were they trying to do?" He said, "They were trying to scare you off." And I said, "Well, they did a damn good job of it." You know. And I said, I asked him, "Well, yeah, just out of curiosity," I said, what, because I remember how he got up and he was like rigid when he went to leave the office. He was like a zombie. And I asked him, I said, "What was going through your head as you left my office?" And he said, "The voices were telling me to go get a shank, which is a homemade prison knife, and stick it in your belly." You know. And I'm like, whoa. And, you know, I was thinking, well, I've worked with this guy for like 6-9 months now. He wouldn't do anything like that. You know, I was completely confident, you know, he would never do anything like that. So I asked him, I said, "Well, why didn't you do that?" And he turns around, and he looks at me, and he goes, "Because I couldn't find one. And nobody would give me one."
Oh my God.
And I'm like, whoa.
That's really,
you know, that was a nasty wake-up call.